Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life,
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the 817 podcast. EJ and I are excited to be back together. It's been a few weeks. We had a couple pre-recorded ones. We hope you enjoyed our conversations with Smooth Vega and Annette Gordon-Reed, but we're excited to be back together and dive into some local news this week.
It feels like a journey because we recorded those super early. I want to say we recorded Smooth maybe like 4 weeks before we were actually posted.
Yeah, like mid-June.
Yeah. We've both been out for we were out for Independence Day, and then I guess random stuff this last weekend.
Yeah, EJ was out running a massive conference in Vegas for the kids, for the school counselors.
Yep, that was good. But it's honestly what's crazy. I mean, I was flying back on the plane, and it made me think about how we started this over COVID when, like, we had a lot of time on our hands. And now it's like work is kind of looking normal. And it's like, man, I guess I'm not as mad as Fort Worth when I'm busy. You know, like, it's like this idea, like, I wonder how much COVID created a lot of like angst because like we're stuck in the house. We have more time to read everything, analyze. And like now it's like, I was like, oh snaps, I need to get back in my groove. It's been so long. So I'm excited because I basically did all my reading while on the plane yesterday. So
nice.
Excited to have the conversation. You want to lead into the first story?
Yeah, let's do it. So this came out of the Fort Worth report earlier this week, but it is about how people experiencing homelessness in Fort Worth is down 40% year over year, which is pretty wild. And even in perspective of something we'll talk about a little bit, like Fort Worth is very high on the list of impending evictions. So the fact that the number of people experiencing homelessness in the city is down is pretty crazy. And the reason for it is these apartment complexes that have been being built over the last few years that are permanent supportive housing for those chronically experiencing homelessness. The development is tailored to fit in with the neighborhoods that they're in and includes 12 structures meant to look like single-family homes that house 48 residents. It's part of an approach to homelessness that emphasizes housing first while also offering services to help integrate people into a community through opportunities like job placement and healthcare services. It's just really encouraging to see Fort Worth approach this issue in a way that is not move these people out of downtown and stick them on Lancaster like Fort Worth did in the 90s and early 2000s. And especially in the last Texas Ledge session where they passed a law making it illegal to camp to have homeless camps in Texas. Like, it's just really cool to see that Fort Worth is kind of out ahead of this issue, actually making strides in these communities and actually helping people. I feel like that's something that we talk about a lot, is a lot of things that get passed in the city or things that are happening just like don't actually work towards helping people. But this is just a really practical, well thought out, well connected way to help people that just need some help to get going again.
City and county governments have received $63 million and counting for rent assistance programs. Meanwhile, housing and urban development allocated more than $13 million to Fort Worth alone to address homelessness. So, you know, cash is coming, but at the same time, looking at some of the strategies here of how do we fund it, the development of the new Leaf setup was used for private funds for 65% of the project. So only 35% was publicly funded. So I think that's also interesting to see how both private and public are collaborating on it. Also interesting to see that roughly about 33% of people experiencing homelessness in Tarrant County have been homeless for less than a month. fewer than 10% who have been homeless longer than a year.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I don't know what your take is kind of on that, but
yeah. So these communities are geared towards people that have been experiencing homelessness for more than a year to try and break that cycle for them and to help get them the resources they need to get back on their feet and get going. And it was really accelerated by federal stimulus money. So the timeline of it was really pushed up because we put those dollars to use towards this. Yeah, and just the size of it is something that is really encouraging. When programs like this get too big, all put in one place, that's kind of how like projects form, you know? And so them spreading these out, making them smaller communities that fit in with the neighborhoods they're already in, incorporating people living in these apartments into those neighborhoods, it gives a sense of belonging that is a lot better than, you know, just throwing everybody in one place and writing that off as this is where people who are experiencing homelessness go and everyone else stay away from that part of the city, which is what Fort Worth has traditionally done. One thing that I would love to see with this also is a lot of people experiencing homelessness obviously don't have cars and rely on public transportation. Yep. So these apartments, these living situations need to be situated near good public transportation to make things like jobs consistent for people. Like that's something that leads to chronic homelessness is you get a job, but you don't have a car. And so with the crappy public transportation system that Fort Worth has, like, are you going to consistently show up to work? Maybe, maybe not. Like that is a barrier for people to overcome. So I would love to see these situated right around bus stops so that it's easy for these people to get to their friends, get around the city, get to and from work, make it feel less isolating than it potentially could be. So I think that this is a great start, and especially in the face of a deadline for camping becoming illegal in Texas, like this is something we need to get ahead of that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. And I think it's a very positive story in a positive direction, but let's also go to the second story we want to talk about. For those of you who may not remember kind of how this style works, you know, we do a couple short stories at the beginning and then we do a big story and then our wins and losses. So, I would like to kind of talk about, what we saw about the evictions and how we are fourth or in the top 10 of eviction filings as a city in the country. So I would love to get your take on that, and how does that play, and what would you like to see as our programs that we're helping and supporting people in this month, July 31st?
Yeah, so the eviction moratorium runs out at the end of the month at this point. I mean, I guess it could...
We're 4th out of 10.
It could get extended. But yes, Fort Worth or Tarrant County is at 4th, has the 4th most eviction filings pending of anywhere in the country, which means that we've, brought people experiencing homelessness down 40%, but we're chopping at the bit to make sure we get back to where we were at this time last year. Right now, there are more than 43,000 households that owe some $146 million in rent in Tarrant County.
Wow.
That's crazy. I mean, that's a ton. And nationwide total rent debt is upward of $20 billion, which is absolutely insane. So, this is something staring Tarrant County and Fort Worth in the face. And what are we going to do about it? We've had rental assistance programs through the CARES Act and through stimulus funds. which getting that out to people has been pretty hit and miss. I know that Texas in general has really struggled with helping people, which
$4 million has been paid out in full assistance from the city of Fort Worth, and there's approximately $50 million left to distribute across the Tarrant County area.
Yeah. So, and I mean, how long has this been going on? You know, we're going on like 16 months.
What was the money count you said that we owe?
146 million.
So you still got nearly $100 million of value that we need. Well,
so we can barely, we, from the program that we have, which clearly is struggling to actually get money into people's pockets, we can only cover a third of the back rent due just in Tarrant County. Like, what do we do? What do we do next? Do we, like, where do we just let these people go out onto the streets, even though we're working against that and trying to find ways to fix that? It's just like, we have a few weeks left to fix this problem, and it kind of just feels like we're looking at it, hoping that something's going to change.
Yeah. This is also making me think about, like, this is not a, we're not a financial or an economy podcast, but, the idea here of, the difference about this COVID, the recession that came with this COVID, it was a people recession, meaning that people suffered. The unemployment rate got to double digits, highest since the Great Depression. But markets and like companies and assets really didn't decrease at all. And so the idea of a markets recession or actual those things being hit, to me, I mean, I'm just trying to like see like dots here in the sense of like, this seems like this could really impact all these big businesses who owns a lot of their cash in real estate. That not only once this breaks for the people, but also for the companies, but then two, and then like you're seeing people not going back to the office. So like, I know Fort Worth houses have just broke, the median price just broke $300,000 for a Fort Worth house. So personal houses are going up, but what is going to happen to offices, big places like that? And then like, I don't know, I guess like, if people are going to have to move out to smaller towns because they can't afford Fort Worth pricing, I don't know. I just think there seems like this fear, I guess, on like, the market responding after all of this is done.
Yeah. Well, and so statewide, the Texas Rent Relief Program has paid out $445 million, which is less than 1/3 of the relief funds allocated to the state by the U.S. Treasury Department. So it's like Texas has sucked at it. Tarrant County has sucked at it. The money is out there to help people, and we're just sitting on it. But to that point about the housing market, like I was talking to a friend last night who has the option to work remotely, and they have a steady, well-paying job, and they're saying, like, Fort Worth has already gotten too expensive for me to live on my own, so now I'm going to go look at some other cities and evaluate what's out there.
Yeah.
And it's like Fort Worth really is at the bottom end of being expensive.
Yeah.
But very quickly, we're already pricing out people that had moved here for cost of living, and now that they have the option to move elsewhere, are saying, yeah, like I'm going to look for another city that's even cheaper.
Yeah, and I even think about what Elon Musk is doing with the Starlink internet, where like it's like satellite internet, and like it's like 120 megs in the middle. Like my dad lives in the middle of nowhere, so he lives out of the city limits, so he has really poor internet. But he's talking about how company, like they basically have like a wait list of over 100,000. I wouldn't even say over 150,000 people already ready to go for the Elon Starlink internet. If you can get 150 megabits per second out in the middle of nowhere, it really opens it up where I could live anywhere. Like it's kind of like, so this idea of wanting to like, I mean, who knows, get your own big house in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and you have still download speeds and streaming successful for Zoom and all that. hey, maybe that will work for some people.
Yeah, well, and that's part of Biden's infrastructure plan too, is making sure that high-speed accessible internet is available to everyone. So a lot of these things are working in tandem with each other, where it's like you said, a lot of people have their wealth tied up in real estate, and now that people can work remotely, they're leaving more expensive areas, coming to especially Texas, raising the prices of things, and which is pushing people further and further out. And so you can go anywhere and work if you've got a great internet connection.
Yeah. And looking at it, by the way, it's 500,000 people have placed an order or deposit for SpaceX Starlink internet service. The service is currently beta stage with more than 10,000 participants. So, I mean, 500,000 people. But no, and I think that's why, like, going back to like what makes a good city going forward, it's no longer just like, oh, what company can I bring here that's going to give me 800 people, 2,000 people? Every single person. It's turned into a player's game. You know, like the NBA is a player's league, where it's like, you know, the players are valuable, right? What LeBron James decides to do changes the landscape of the entire NBA. And I think as a player's league, as kids grow up with the basketball, like loving certain players and not so obsessed with the team. Yeah. That's same thing's happening with states and cities. I mean, look at California, San Francisco, where, right, people are moving to Austin, and Austin, I feel like has turned around because of influencers and people. So everyone who's a knowledge-based worker who has a high-demand job, I mean, they have the choice to be where they want. And so we got to start changing our recruitment to help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But so long story short, Texas, Tarrant County, like, let's get people the resources that we have to not end up experiencing homelessness. And the Fort Worth Report article specifically cites someone who has been waiting for 6 weeks since they applied and still hasn't heard anything, even though they're calling and emailing. It's like, this shouldn't be that hard. We have the resources available. Let's get it to people so that we can avoid this mass exodus of people from their homes. We don't need to be fourth in the country in pending evictions when we have money to keep people at home.
Yeah. So there's also resources. July 31st is kind of the end, but if you're looking for information on Arlington, Fort Worth, and Tarrant County, GetRentHelp.com is a one-stop shop for folks in our community to go visit and find out what rental assistance looks like for them. So check that out. And if you know of people who are trying to think through this. So, well, speaking of things that are overfunded, you want to talk about the Panther Island and all the money we spent there?
Yeah. So front page Sunday of the Star Telegram, really in general, the Water District has been in the news a lot over the last few weeks, and we'll get more into that. But another headline that says Panther Island to get federal funding in 2022. If I had $10 for every time an article with a headline like this has been written about Panther Island over the last 15 years, I could probably fund Panther Island getting dug and the river being built. But in as vague of a quote as possible, Rep. Kay Granger, when talking about potential funds, said, "It comes in different buckets, so there may be some in this one and then some in the next one. I think it will be funded for everything they can spend in the next cycle." For whatever reason, she thinks that in 2022, Panther Island will get federal funding to have the canal dug to actually turn it into an island. This past weekend, the second of the three bridges, the North Main Bridge, opened up. So that's exciting. We've had two of the bridges open after 15 years.
Have you checked it out? Have you driven on it?
No, I've been over the White Settlement one a lot, but I have not. I haven't this week driven to where I'd go over the North Main one. But I don't know. I mean, I read this article. It doesn't really say anything to me other than I will believe it when I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be cool looking, by the way. It really would.
It would be like, it's like, yeah, like this was an interesting idea that will be really cool if and when it ever comes to fruition. I can't argue against it being easier to build the bridges over land than over water. I don't know what that like looks like, but just practically it's like, yeah, that makes sense that it's easier to build the bridge before it's underwater. But I mean, it's been 15 years. They've been saying this whole time. All of these Trump lovers in Tarrant County, even though not throwing a fit, even though he was the one that defunded this project. And now they're probably not going to give Biden any credit if we do fund it in 2022.
Yeah.
But I read this article and I'm like, I don't believe you. Like I don't believe you. It's been 15 years and this hasn't come yet. So like why should I believe that this is going to happen?
And, JD Granger serves as the executive director and earns $242,000 to basically not get this done.
Yeah. Pay me half of that and I'll do his job.
Yeah.
What has he done?
Yeah.
Nothing. So it's like, and he has no incentive to do everything. He's getting paid $250,000 a year to do nothing.
Yeah.
But speaking of the water district, the Fort Worth Report has a really great article of what is the water district, because it kind of just feels like a smoke and mirrors thing, and really goes into how much it costs taxpayers. So the head of the water district makes $350,000 a year. The deputy GM makes $275,000. JD Granger makes $242,000. And basically their job is to get water to Tarrant County. And I don't really know what else.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it says water flood protection, recreational opportunities, making sure that we're being good stewards of the environment. It's a wholesale water provider to dozens of cities in the 11 county area. It provides water using a system of lakes and pipelines. It owns 4 lakes reservoirs: Bridgeport, Cedar Creek, Eagle Mountain, Richland Chambers. It also stores water in Lakes Arlington, Benbrook, and Worth. In addition to providing water, it protects Fort Worth from, like I said, flooding by managing 27 miles of levees built by the Army Corps of Engineers. That's kind of cool. The water district manages the Trinity Trail system, which spans more than 100 plus miles, as well as Eagle Mountain Park, Twin Points Park, and Northwest Tarrant County. So it does a lot. I mean, that's a lot of good stuff. But I think what the kicker, what really got him into the news, and shout out Jessica Priest for I feel like carrying this story locally. It was when the former, quote me if I'm wrong, executive director was trying to get $300,000 of paid leave.
Yeah. So basically Jack Stevens, the former GM who got blown out in this past election, has, I guess, basically banked up all of his time off since he's been on the board, and was trying to kind of sketchily under the table get a $300,000 payout for all of his paid time off. Now you're telling me that this guy who makes $350,000 a year for the past half decade or decade, whatever it's been, has never taken any time off and wants to be paid out all of that money in its entirety. Like, talk about sketchy.
Yeah.
Like,
I think Granger was getting some too. Like they showed that he had like paid leave, maybe like I have to look it up.
Something crazy too. Yeah.
But it was like 60 or something. I got to look it up though.
Yeah. And it's like, what are you doing? What is clearly you've taken time off because we don't have an island in the city. That's what got them into the news. Obviously, once it started making headlines, the water district came really under fire. That payment was stopped, and the new GM really has a lot of questions to answer, where there is skepticism towards this department now.
The kicker here too is the lowest paid employees, who also live in Tarrant County, are $18,000 and $14,000, and that is reserve patrol officers and seasonal park attendants. So like, it seems like part-time work, but even if some of that was a full-time work, if people were making that a full, let's just say even double it for the full-time people, I mean, you're making, 10x, nearly 10x what your city of people are doing who are trying to live in this city as well.
Yeah.
So,
really the whole department. I mean, I think that this is
360 employees.
Yeah. I think that this is, something in general that has come out of the last year is that people are feeling empowered, which they should be, and people are feeling more informed, which they also should be. So we actually need to take a look at what is the value of what this district is providing to us. How can we actually know what's going on behind closed doors? How can we hold these people accountable? And how can we make sure that people are being properly compensated and paid for their work and their time? I can guarantee that a $300,000 check to the outgoing GM who did a lot of sketchy under the table things while he was in charge is not something that is transparent. So now for the new GM, how can we continue to drive transparency from your department and start to build back up some public trust in what you're doing? Because we obviously need clean water. North Texas is growing. We need to have plans in place for how to support the growing population. But we also just can't be paying a guy $250,000 to work on a 15-year project that hasn't really gone much of anywhere. We can't be paying, combined over $500,000 to GM and assistant GM when we're paying pennies to people practically doing the work in the parks. So I think that we're just asking for a little bit of transparency. I think that's one thing that the Fort Worth report has really helped with is driving transparency and reporting and actually getting these people talking to reporters. Same with when the new city council starts to get rolling, when this new GM starts to get going, what are changes that we are going to see? And it's just something that we all have to keep an eye on and continue to watch to make sure that you're actually working for the people that elect you, not for yourself.
I think these are the positives of, the electric grid shenanigans. Like a lot of these energy focus, private public kind of partnership organizations that are really infrastructure heavy are now seems to be positioned that we want transparency within you, like we asked from police departments and those city officials. Like it's crazy how how much we wanted transparency and accountability to criminal justice in our areas. But now I feel like the new wave isn't that we want the same thing for our partners in infrastructure, which is good for citizens.
Yeah,
there's a hunger to know that now that we've all experienced the shenanigans of the electric grid.
Yeah.
Did you see they have 60 ideas? They reported that they have 60 ideas on how to fix it. I guess they just like threw up every idea on a wall.
I have idea number 1. Connect us back to the rest of the United States, you morons. Deprivatize. That's it. Yeah. That's the idea. That's how we fix it. Step 1. Connect us to everybody else.
By the way, Dan Bunman became general manager of the Tarrant Regional Water District. So that's where we are with that. Want to move to the big story?
Let's do it. So a few months ago, during the Texas Leg session, Republicans tried to pass a bill that would greatly restrict voter access, especially in Harris County and especially to people of color. In order to block that, the Democrats walked out, which created to where there were not enough people to vote to have a quorum. Basically, what that means is you can't just put 3 people in a room and vote on something and say it's passed. You have to have a minimum number, a minimum percentage of the House there to actually do something. So Governor Abbott called a special session, filled the agenda with a bunch of garbage that doesn't help Texans, including this same voter right restriction bill. So the Democrats left again, and what this means is they can't set foot in the state without being arrested and locked in the legislative building until they, quote unquote, do their job, according to Governor Abbott. So they're all in D.C. Essentially, they're like hiding from Texas law enforcement officials. Kind of. They're not like actually hiding. They just can't be in Texas. But this has brought into light how Texas ranks 45th in the country in voter accessibility. And we're out here trying to make us 50th. I think the goal is to make us dead last and making it easier for people to vote. What that obviously does is ostracize communities of color and lower income, which in general tend to vote Democratic. So it remains to be seen exactly what's going to happen. Governor Abbott says that he's going to call special session after special session until they pass this. However, he hasn't funded the legislative branch, and their funding runs out on August 31st. So I don't think he could actually call special sessions after August 31st because he can't pay them to come and show up and quote unquote do their job. So the goal for Texas Democrats now is to help urge Congress, National Congress, to pass a voting rights act that the Supreme Court and Republicans have really stripped down the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to basically nothing at this point. So that they could come back to Texas, and if something like this were to pass, it would not hold up nationally or against the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're sitting now, is all of our state reps in the House cannot set foot in Texas until we don't really know when.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Like, that's crazy. That's a big sacrifice for them and for their families to kind of have to uproot their lives in the name of protecting voting rights. So there were only, I believe that there were 4 Democrats in the House that stayed behind for various reasons, but still not enough to meet a quorum, and 50 that are now in D.C. I believe they met with Kamala Harris this past week, which was the second time that they've gotten to meet with her
So, and a little bit about some of the things that are both on the Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3 is ban drive-through voting, 24-hour voting, and prohibiting 24-hour voting, strategies that were basically happening in Harris County, which seems to have upset Republicans, and really kind of the big thing here. And the reason why this is kind of a story for the 817 pod, not just that it's a state, but our own leaders have been really kind of being in charge of this. So Nicole Collier, who is the Fort Worth rep, chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, she sat on the Election Reform Bill Conference Committee during the regular session and helped organize the quorum break. So I think it's just really cool to see her and Ramon Romero really be leaders, I feel, in this. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, I feel very grateful to have just strong Fort Worth politicians who are fighting for our rights when we're often hearing it the other way around for Fort Worth.
Yeah, absolutely. And in general, it's just such a stark difference from we made it so that anybody can hold a gun in Texas without any sort of background check or permit. Like, you can just walk around with a gun. Doesn't matter who you are, what you're going to do with it. You can have a gun. But if you want to vote and actually participate in democracy, you have to provide multiple forms of ID. That's a part of what this bill would potentially do for mail-in voting, multiple forms of ID, not even trying to limit extremely who could actually have a mail-in ballot. We understand the goal of not wanting people to participate in democracy. Like, no matter what you say about election security, it's very clear that the election was secure, it was fair, there was no sign of election fraud, despite what Dan Patrick and his cronies wanted to waste resources on exploring. But we want to make it harder to do that. But if you want to walk around with a gun strapped to your chest, no big deal.
Kicker as well, though, here too is everyone the right is spinning this as like, oh, they're wasting all of our tax dollars. They're saying something like $48,000 a day, one of them, but all of this they're able to pull this off through donations,
right?
So I think that's a kicker also in kind of the story. So what's really neat, though, I mean, I guess the reason why we're not 50th is there's two reasons. And that is we have a 13-day early voting period, and because of voters' ability to vote outside of their precinct, which I think I did this last year, which also meant that this 2020 presidential election had the highest voter turnout in Texas since 1992, but that's nationally because of the polarization of the Trump administration. So, yeah, I feel like it's just kind of crazy. I mean, like how it almost feels like I wonder if one of them does come back to Texas and they're like arrested right when they get like out of the airport or something.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, that's basically what
they're threatening.
Yeah. Well, and so they did pass, which I don't know all of the like rules of the Texas legislature because they're super convoluted, but they did pass something where if one of these people comes back to the state of Texas, they can and will be arrested and essentially locked in the Capitol building until they vote on whatever. So that's in play. Texas law enforcement officials don't have jurisdiction outside of Texas, so they can't actually do anything as long as they don't come back into the state. But now for an undetermined amount of time, 50 of our elected officials cannot be in Texas. And so who knows what their families are going to do. It's just I mean, it's crazy. Like, I just don't know if there's any other way to describe where we're at now. It's just really wild that in 2021, almost more than 50 years after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, we're still out here having elected officials have to flee their homes at risk of being arrested, fighting for voting rights.
Yeah, and I think what's crazy, like the drive-through voting showed that it worked. We have proven that it was safe. And I just think about, like, I feel like if you're anti drive-through voting, if you're voting against that, it's like you should not be able to stand or sit. I mean, to be in a Chick-fil-A drive-through line anymore in your life. Like, if you are not about this voting right stuff, then you should not allow to have a meal through a drive-through. Because if you've seen Chick-fil-A actually optimize that drive-through, it's always like out the wazoo. And like, there's no way I'm going to sit into that line. And then 5 minutes later, you're like eating your food. You know, but what's crazy about it, we all know that if we said, hey, Chick-fil-A, run our voting the way you run your Chick-fil-A, somehow it would all break. And like, oh, sorry, we can't run, we can't run this voting stuff because we know how Chick-fil-A rolls. So, which is why my wife and I do our best to not visit. But I just think it's funny how, like, the best drive-through is the most, like, conservative fast food company in America. And like, but all these conservatives, like, we can't do drive-through voting, people.
Too complicated.
Yeah, too complicated.
Well, let's move into our wins and losses. Do you want to start with your loss?
Yes. My loss is, I'm going to keep it short. I mean, it's just, I was in Vegas all last week, and on my last day in Vegas, masks were required in buildings where I guess work is being done. It wasn't like in restaurants, but it was for I guess like shopping or things like that. And so masks were coming back. It was coming back in LA, and I guess Las Vegas the day I flew out, it also was coming back. And then Texas. I mean, we just moved over to we're now, I guess, what is it called?
Like high community spread.
Yeah, we're now high community spread, over 10%. So that is my loss, and I don't know what you feel about it.
Yeah, I mean,
forward.
I don't have any sympathy for unvaccinated adults who are catching COVID. Like, honestly, sorry. Like, you made your choice. It's a stupid choice. It's an uninformed choice. It's an ignorant choice. And like, you can reap the consequences of that. But what really gets me is how this is going to potentially affect kids who are not vaccinated because it's not available to them yet. Whether that's going back into school where schools aren't going to require masks and there's not going to be extra distancing. That just really tugs at me, where kids and potentially vaccinated parents are going to face the consequences of ignorance and selfishness and arrogance by potentially having their kids get COVID, which we don't know that the Delta variant is like more aggressive towards kids than past variants. And it looks like it's going to be maybe like winter before a vaccine for under 12 gets approved. So like, we've got this first semester to see what happens, but it just makes me really sad that parents of young school-age children are being put in a position again of having to make choices for their kids' health because of the ignorance of a large group of people in this country.
98.9% of COVID cases are among unvaccinated people. So COVID, the vaccine, works. Also, according to the Texas Department of Health and Human Services, 49% of the Tarrant County population aged 12 and older is vaccinated. But Tarrant County Public Health reports that only 30% of residents are fully vaccinated.
Interesting.
That's super. It seems gave me a super low vibe, which is why I read it. Yeah, I think that's basically the loss though. Yeah, the last 7 days was 11.86% as of Tuesday, up from 3.2% on June 16th. So, nearly triple.
Yeah. Kids getting sick because adults are idiots sucks.
Yep.
And like, that's a big loss.
And it is kind of crazy that 3 members who were fully vaccinated from the House Democrats test positive for COVID-19.
Right. Which the vaccine's not a guarantee that you're not going to get it, but it is a guarantee that you aren't going to get it seriously.
Yep.
All right. So moving into my loss, in the past few weeks, Dallas hosted CPAC, and one of our long-standing restaurants here in Fort Worth hosted a segment of Fox and Friends before one of the mornings of CPAC. So Old South Pancake House on University was dubbed as the spot to host the Fox and Friends segment one morning, and sucks for North Texas that it had to play host to this whole event. And it's a bummer to see a long-standing establishment like that play host to a show that is, driving the reason that Tarrant County sucks at getting the vaccine. So, yeah, just a short, bad loss.
I mean, Big Al, never been there, so it seems like a good decision. But it seems like they'll get along with the Chick-fil-A people. But let's go to I'll do my win. My win's actually going to be like shout out to the Fort Worth Report for just really crushing it. But then also this like a few minutes with Mayor Maddie Parker. So it seems like Mayor Maddie Parker, and she mentioned this on our show. I don't know if we put it into the show. We were maybe talking beforehand, how she was thinking about doing a podcast. And so she partnered with the Fort Worth Report, and they're like 3 episodes in. It's called A Few Minutes with Mayor Maddie Parker. And what I love about it is like Jessica Priest is asking the questions. So it's like, honest questions. It's an honest look. And I feel like, I guess my win is honestly to Maddie Parker for, I think, doing the right action steps since Opal Lee's kind of celebration for Juneteenth. She was there. She went to Como Fest. She just was in the paper for a nonprofit to help with criminal justice.
She's shown up to speak out on Aaron Dean needing a trial date.
Yep, that happened. I think she even wrote a letter about it, like to accelerate that action step. So my win is, I think, Maddie Parker for showing the good action steps, and then also building transparency and accountability, because she didn't have to do that. And then also, I just feel like she's doing these little things that a lot of us won't see, but I think that it needs to be acknowledge that. I feel really impressed with her first, I guess, couple months in office. Yeah.
Thanks for being transparent and for creating more avenues for people to know what's going on, and for openly talking about what your weeks look like. I think that's something that goes a long way towards building trust with a local government. My win is that Fort Worth's first children's library has an opening date set, August 14th. It's a beautiful new building on Lancaster. And I'm just really excited for it. We've got a big, super nice children's library coming to our neighborhood. And I think that it is just a huge win for the city, a huge win for East Fort Worth and for our neighborhood, and just for driving potential exposure to books in an area that really needs that. So I'm really excited for it. We will definitely be there on opening day. We'll probably walk over there, and I'm just really excited to see that come to fruition in the city.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's It looks beautiful, and I think we are really excited for it over here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming back and listening to us.
We did it.
We did it.
A whole episode, just us two.
I know. We're looking forward to City Council ramping back up and getting back together soon, and seeing everything that's going to go along with the budget and redistricting. We're coming up on having done this for a year, and so looking forward to maybe doing an event around that. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Dopamine,